Okay, we should be connected now. And yes, I see Sergeant Major has first blood on 2 platforms. I see you on Rumble and I see you over here on YouTube, old man. Pulling double duty, and I appreciate that. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I hit the button and everything went wrong and I had to reboot the machine. So here we are, but we're going to talk about liberty and the impact of government control on individual rights and liberties. And we're going to do a little experiment this morning, which I'll explain after the stinger. All right. Good morning, everybody. I see Uncle Steve, Fish and Golf, and Pit Danny who joined us over on YouTube. A couple dozen people watching already between YouTube and Rumble. Waller's with us this morning, too. It is always a good morning because it's morning. Protect, attack, and take naps. This morning, so I've been up since about 2:30 working, and I skipped my nap this morning. Usually if I'm not up that early, I get a good 30 or 40 minute little shut eye before the show, but not today. So coffee matters. All right. So the topic this morning, I'm going to dive into contrasting views of liberty and government control, emphasizing the impact of government on individual liberties and the consequences of over-restriction. And I'm going to use an extreme example, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why we use extreme examples to explore ideas and how the left and right, and I don't like the terminology of that distinction. I'll get into that a little bit, but for effective purposes, people generally understand what is meant by the left and right. But a key difference between the left and right is an intelligent thinking person on the right. The camera seems to be flickering. Let me know if y'all are seeing something weird happening there, and I apologize for I don't know what's going on there. But the audio matters more this morning than the video. So, on the right, one tends to use the extreme example to explore a concept and to develop a thought process, whereas on the left, one tends to use the extreme example as the case to prove the point. A good example of this would be in the abortion argument. Of course, the left likes to say, well, you just want to force everybody to have babies. And what about life of the mother? What about when a woman's life is in danger? Or what about a case of rape or incest? It's like, okay, no. Let me use your argumentative logic in the same way. murder should not be illegal. Well, that's crazy. People just run around murdering each other all the time. Well, what about self-defense? What about cases of self-defense? You know, sometimes it's perfectly reasonable and lawful to kill another person when they are attempting to kill you or to cause you grievous bodily harm. So, because there's an extreme example of a situation in which murder, or more correctly, homicide, must be allowed, then, well, of course, for that reason, by the logic of the abortionist, for that reason, all homicide should be permissible under the law. And that's why we don't use the extreme case to make the point or to support the claim. We use the extreme case to explore the concept. So before I get too much further down this road, I want to talk a little bit about this experiment that I'm doing this morning with this particular conversation, and how I got to here. So two things happened kind of on top of each other the other day, and those are, first, I got a new toy. And I got a new toy for a very particular reason, but it happens to be a new toy that has a lot of capability that I can leverage external. It's a very powerful piece of equipment. You guys have probably seen these advertised on Facebook. It's called a Plod Note. It's a little credit card thin almost. It's hard to get this thing out of the case to show it off, but there we go. But it's this little credit card sized voice recorder that is AI powered. And y'all, this thing is scary. What it can do is almost terrifying. And this is not something that I was planning on buying originally, but I bought it because one of the things it does is it connects to the back of your phone, and it will record both sides of a phone call on the voice app, and it'll generate a transcript for you. And it does it very quickly and very efficiently, and it uses AI to generate that transcript. So it's not just a direct transcript of the sounds recorded, because if any of you who have ever dealt with transcription know that it's almost impossible to directly transcribe the sound made by a person speaking. You have to interpret some of the sounds where there are word whiskers, where somebody might mumble a little, or outside noise interferes with the actual sound that's recorded. And so in transcribing, sometimes you have to make assumptions. You have to figure out, well, what word did they probably use there, or can I at least extrapolate from context what word belonged in that spot, et cetera, et cetera. Technical and complex stuff. Well, it does that with phone calls. And the reason I got that is I recently ran into a situation involving a credit report situation. I got dinged by a phone company that after I switched my phone service from one company to the other, they went on billing me for like 6 months and then sent me to collections. And I didn't know. And this happened years ago. And I didn't have anything to go back on and say, no, fuck you guys. You stole my money, and I'm not going to let you steal my money. And I can prove that I was given these guarantees in this situation, and you're lying. So I actually got this so that I'd have it for that. So from now on, anytime I'm going to be on the phone with anything dealing with money at all, that shit's going to be recorded, cataloged, archived, and retained indefinitely, just in case somebody tries to get into some fuckery, because this one in particular shut me down bad on something I was working on, and it really infuriating. But that's that aside. The other thing this thing does, as it does the transcription, that I just kind of started playing with and found to be incredibly powerful, and I'm going to be playing with it. If you guys read the description on the YouTube, on Rumble, wherever you're watching, if you read the description on today's episode, it is in fact not a direct transcription, but a summary of essentially a lecture that I gave to the recorder the other day. And so this is where the other thing happened that went with it, is I've got this new toy that does this new stuff, and I was listening to a Milton Friedman lecture on freedom and liberty and the invisible hand of the market and Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations and all that. And I got to thinking about the extreme cases example that I mentioned a moment ago. And what I did then is I just got up, turned on the recorder, and just started running my damn mouth. I just stepped out in my yard, lit up a cigarette, and just started speaking out loud, thinking out loud. And I went on for about 20 or 25 minutes like that to basically experiment with the capabilities of this device. And what I got back from it impressed me a lot, because I talked out loud about several different subjects, and I kind of rabbit holed off of several different subjects, and I bounced back and forth between them, kind of the way that you guys know that I do on the show sometimes. And I can't let you derail me with the comment, but I can hit you with a top comment badge for that one. That's fun. I had a similar experience. So it broke down what I was talking about into these key points, and it occurred to me that, and this is just like scratching the surface of the power of this device, that hell, I could do a show where I spend 20 minutes talking about each one of these individual key points. And so this morning, while I'm doing the show, this is the experimental part, is I'm running this recorder right now in my pocket, and after the show, I'm going to let it run a transcription and see about extracting from those individual key points that we touch on in a minute as I get into more of this conversation. And I know this show has ended up being more about this than about the topic itself, but I kind of expected that, and it's the new year. I want to try some new things. I want to do something to kind of shake the show up a little bit, because we haven't made any big changes other than Cameron just getting too busy to come into the studio lately in quite a while. So need to shake some things up and do some things a little different on the show. And I'm starting with this. So this morning, I want to talk about and I'm just going to kind of think out loud, the role of government and the two sides of the political coin. There is a good argument to be made that there are other countries which govern more fairly, or even in some cases, arguably, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but the argument's there to be made, more effectively by not having a simple two-party system. Now, in this country, what we have is a de facto two-party system. We do not actually have officially a two-party system. North Korea has officially and technically a two-party system. There is the party that you're allowed to vote for, and the party that exists for the simple purpose of creating the illusion that there is an alternative which you should not choose. And in that system, incredibly corrupt, incredibly restrictive, they do have elections, and there are people who vote for the opposition party. But those people, they are members of the ruling party, and their job is to vote for and to visibly support the opposition party in order to maintain the illusion of the existence of an actual opposition party. Pit Danny asks, do you have a link to get one of those? I'm not going to try to find one right now. Danny, let me get back to you. I can reference you to it, and who knows if you guys are actually interested in that, maybe I'll see about getting an affiliate link from those guys, because I'm already pretty well sold on this device. But like I was saying, there are other countries that have dozens of parties, and they will all have seats in whatever they have that resembles a Congress or a parliament. And in those countries, in order to get anything done, an individual party has to build a parliamentary consensus. They have to build a coalition of multiple parties. So you don't have a party that is the conservative party and a party that is the liberal party. Well, you do, but then you have all these other smaller parties. And the individual other parties are essentially analogous to what the American sensibility understands as a special interest group. So you'll have a clean energy party, and their entire agenda is we want to get things done to make sure that everybody has an electric car by X year. Well, there aren't enough members of that party or enough people to vote for that party for that party to be able to achieve anything on its agenda. So instead, in order for it to do so, it has to deal with other parties that aren't interested in it at all, and essentially trade votes, trade favors for favors. So in defense of the two-party system, that system is basically made for corruption. Because what you have going on there is you are trading your votes like currency for votes from people who are not interested in your position. They don't actually they're not actually interested. It's not that they don't want you to achieve what you want to achieve, but they have no interest in whether or not you achieve it. And so the vote becomes a mere currency. And don't get me wrong, the vote is always a currency because power is currency, influence is currency. That's why there's a whole industry now on social media where the individual participants are referred to as influencers. Influence is currency. That's how Joe Biden got into the position of power that he's in now. He hasn't been selling influence. He's been currency trading influence. He's been trading influence on the currency market like it was a foreign ruble or yen for dollars, for US dollars. And in fairness, there are many things, not least of which are your individual labor efforts that can be conceived of in that way. So let's talk a bit about. I'm going to radically change over to another topic right now because I want to explore this topic more in this kind of as part of this experiment with what I'm going to transcribe and organize later. And guys, let me know in the comments if you're interested. I'll do a walkthrough on this Claude Note device and talk about how it works and what I do with it and kind of what I think I'll be able to do with it. And it's such a brand new toy that I fully expect it will be doing a lot of incredibly powerful stuff in the not too distant future. Stryker says two-party system of a 3-branch de facto government versus 5 branches as existed / intended. Yes. Okay. No, okay. But let me get to the extreme thing. So I mentioned earlier that a key difference between the thinking, the mindset, the rational and philosophical process, a key difference between the rational philosophical process on the left and right is the use of the extreme example. On the left, they tend to use the extreme example as the reason for the rule, right? All the garbage you're hearing about trans and LGBT rights and all that stuff, you're talking about 0.3 of the population, percent of the population. You're talking about a tiny minority whose special interests are being used to bully and harangue and degrade the liberty of the vast majority You're talking about a minority that is so small that it is statistically insignificant. You're talking about a minority that is so small that as a function of policy making in any other place without the use of terrorism would not even be considered as an aspect of the policy decision making process, right? The example that I already used, the life of the mother, rape, incest, as the cases that prove the need for abortion to be legal up to and including post-birth termination of an unwanted deformed child or a child that a person can't afford. And that is not a hyperbolic statement, by the way. You remember Ralph Northam famously was working to pass legislation in Virginia that not only would allow a physician to terminate a child after birth. Well, if the child's born, and then we can take the child and make the child comfortable, and then have a conversation about how to proceed. And then in that legislation, it was very clear that not only did the legislation allow for the termination of a child essentially up until it had left had been discharged from the hospital with its parents, but in the event that the mother was incapacitated for any reason, and it said any reason, which is to say, you've just given birth, you're exhausted, you're mentally and physically exhausted, and quite possibly even, I almost said anesthetized. Well, yeah, anesthetized. You're under the influence of various pain drugs, or maybe even sleeping drugs. You've been given something to help you relax and fall asleep. That qualifies as medically incapacitated, as mentally incapacitated, and in that circumstance, the attending doctor could make the decision that you're not healthy enough to raise the child. And it went down a list that you're not that the child is a conflict for your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, and I shit you not, on the list was your financial health. As you just had the baby, you're tired, you're drugged, you're asleep, and the doctor can legally say, and thank God this didn't actually get passed. This is not the law, but this is a law that was almost signed by a governor. A law for which the governor was enthusiastically preparing himself and doing press conferences in support of. The doctor can say, well, this woman is too broke to raise this baby. This woman is too poor, and so we're just going to go ahead and chop this one up for parts. On the left, the extreme example is used to make the argument for the rule, and that's absurd. On the right, the extreme example works more like this. Let's talk about recreational mass murder. Right? I already made the ridiculous extreme argument earlier that because there are cases where self-defense justifies homicide, then no homicide should be impermissible. That is a very left-wing style argument. Because there are cases in which a woman might be in physical danger if she has a baby, then every woman should always be able to terminate any pregnancy at any time for any reason without exception, up to, including, and beyond birth. You can't get from there to here. But let's just play with it for a minute. Recreational mass murder. Let's imagine a world in which there is no government, no law at all. There are no consequences, and this is an important distinction. There are no consequences enforced upon you by government for homicide. How much fun would it be to go into a crowded park and just open fire. Completely arbitrarily, right? You don't pick a race, religion, anything. You just say, you know what? People in yellow shirts today. I've got my chalkboard and I've got my rifle, and I'm just going to bang and make a mark on the chalkboard, right? And there are no consequences laid down on you by government. How many of us are going to go out there and engage in that incredibly entertaining and fulfilling, oh, wait, we're talking about a world where there are no consequences laid down on you by government. So what's to stop someone who, in that large crowd, statistically containing a large number, because there are no restrictions, of other armed citizens, how many shots do you think you get off before you yourself are perfectly legally homicided? Doesn't last long, right? You don't get far that way. Take the Vegas shooter, largest mass shooting in U.S. history. And here is a good case, an extreme example that does go to the point, right? Deus Volt, brother. Never forget, brother, you get a top badge this morning. That is some quality engagement. But the Vegas shooter situation. How is it, do you think, that he was able to shoot so many people? Now, he had a very significant tactical advantage. He had air superiority, firing from a concealed, elevated position. But you know what that concert had? Magnetometers. It was a gun-free zone. Imagine you were to open fire like that on a rodeo in the South. How many people do you think would hit the ground before a bunch of cowboys started doing everything in their power to cut that building down with their .357 Magnums? Right? Hell, they may only have 6 rounds apiece, but times 100 of them, that'll put out some fucking windows. So, you see, this is an example of what I was talking about. The use of the extreme example in philosophical, political, and rhetorical thinking on the right is about exploring the consequences of the extreme example, exploring how the extreme example can come to exist, or if it can come to exist. Right? Let's talk about monopolies sometime. People use the idea of the evil monopoly crushing all the little guys as an argument against the existence of a totally laissez-faire free market capitalism. And I ask you, please, point me to one. Anyone, give me one example of a lasting monopoly, of a monopoly that even began. Right? And your brand new concept product doesn't count. And there's a reason for that, and I can explore that with you if you'd like. But I dare you to find me an example of an actual monopoly that was not enforced by government. Monopolies cannot exist. Well, okay. In fairness, it is more correct to say a monopoly cannot persist unless one of two things is true. Either the monopoly is a product that cannot be competed with for whatever reason, right? If nobody can make the product cheaper or better then you can have an organic monopoly that persists because nobody can compete with you. That's a lot to ask for, right? I could be the only guy making cheeseburgers one day, and all it takes is somebody coming out and saying, hey, his $2 cheeseburgers are pretty good, but my $5 cheeseburger is even better. Enjoy the $2 cheeseburger, when you're in a hurry, you need a quick lunch. But why don't you treat yourself? Treat yourself. Spend a little extra and get something better. People will buy the better product. Guaranteed. Hey, his $2 cheeseburger, man, $2 is a lot for lunch. Now, my cheeseburger's not all that great. In fact, it may actually be made of cardboard, but it's 45 cents, and you can have it in 1 minute. Walk up, hand me $1, tax included, you got two edible cheeseburgers. Your lunch is handled, and you're saving money. People will buy it. People will buy gold for gold and trash for pennies every time. So an organic monopoly is a near metaphysical impossibility because somebody can either make your product better or cheaper. And better doesn't have to be legitimately better. Right? I could make, for example, an iPhone and say, okay, this iPhone that I sell, forget copyright law and everything, you're removing the government from the example for a minute. And I could just completely steal all of the technology and intellectual property and everything. And the only thing that's different about my iPhone, which cost $137,000, is that the case is actually made of gold. I don't have to sell a lot of those to make it worth my time to sell them. Same thing on the other side. You make something, I'm not even talking about a product that differs in any way generally. I could do one that's just, the screen is shitty glass that always breaks, and the cameras don't actually work, but they look like they're there, and it costs $100 instead of $1,000. People will buy that. Now, I have to sell a lot of them. You can only ever, there's only two ways to make money, right? Markup and distribution. You can do both, but you have to do one or the other. Now, so, can't have a monopoly without a government. Government intervention is required for a monopoly. And this moment right here is exactly the kind of thing that I'm running this experiment for. Because I'm recording all of this quite separately on my little recording device, and I'm going to go back and look at the transcription in a little bit, and that'll be pretty groovy. Let me see. I got off track somewhere. Yeah, I got off track a little too far back. I do want to re-explore several of the topics that I've talked about this morning. And like I said, this morning, this topic chain was highly experimental, and I can't wait to look at the transcript and the summary after this, and the mind map that's generated by the AI after this, and probably peel out a whole nother couple of shows off of this, off of what I've done with just this morning's conversation. I really want to explore the extreme example using recreational mass murder as a stand-in for the life of the mother argument, and probably also spend a little time talking about the absurdity of the life of the mother argument, because of course there are no cases in which the termination of a baby can save the life of a mother. There aren't. They don't exist. And I'll probably do a whole show on that in the not too distant future, because I know we're going to start hearing more shit about Roe v. Wade and how as we get closer and closer to the general election, the Democrats are going to forget that guns and abortion are their losingest issues, and they're going to start arguing for the constitutional codification of Roe v. Wade, which is psychotic. And I'll explain to you guys on one show as soon as we hear them start talking about abortion in a big way on the political stage. I'll go way down the rabbit hole on the claim that there are no cases where an abortion can save a mother's life. So, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it there. I'm going to go take a look at the transcript of the summary. And tomorrow is Firearms Friday. And then, unless there's some big news over the weekend, I believe Monday's show will be, Monday's show at a minimum, will be a part of this experiment. And I think I'm going to use whatever I can extract from the summary and the bullet points from today's show and from this lecture that I talked about earlier. I'm going to feed some of that into one of the Chat GPT type thing. There's one where you dump one in. You dump in a concept and it'll spit out a whole PowerPoint presentation. I've used it on the show a few times, and what it does, it does a reasonably serviceable job of generating a functional, well-formatted, and generally attractive presentation, but it's kind of a bad first draft, which is incredibly powerful. So, I can get the machine to spit me out a bad first draft, and it's done a lot of the work that goes into crafting a presentation like that for a show like this that is mechanical, non-creative, non-engaging work. So it takes all of the formatting, all of the organizing and ordering, all of the stuff that's not actually developing the thoughts and concepts, and it kind of does all that work for you in a very general and broad way. And then if you're doing it like I do it, then you just take that bad first draft, you go through and you read the content of it and you correct it. And so I'm really, really interested to see how how using the Claude Note device coupled with one of those programs affects the efficiency of designing the show and putting out a good product for you guys. So we're coming up on the end of the first week of the new year, and I can't wait to see where this takes us with the show. I've got a few other things in the hopper that I'm hoping will take us in another big direction, not least of which are some generally unrelated external projects from the show, which I think are going to take us in some interesting directions on the profitability and therefore the amount of time that's available for me to work on expanding the show. So thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Oh, and also, because I know Ma and Granddad are watching down there at the farm, and Dad mentioned that the little ones are there with him, and yes, and thanks, guys, for taking care of the kiddos while the wife and I handle business over on this end, and we're just a little tied up, but, a big part of that is, taking my kids down to the farm, or dropping them off with Mom and Dad in the parking lot so they can take them to the farm and save me a little gas on top of all the other goodness. I know that my monkeys are about to be down on that farm, and they're just going to be out running around in the yard. They're going to be out running in the woods, playing, out paddling. They're going to have a ball. And hey, kiddos, I love you. And I'll see you in a couple of days. Y'all be good. Listen to Mom and Granddad. Be safe out there. And watch out for the bear. Love you.